Hello everyone, for Channel 6 TV Community Focus, I'm Dennis George. On Thursday night, the Marion County Board of Education will consider a resolution that would enable the school board to raise the local tax rate greater than the 4% allowed by law. And I have with me today a member of the Board of Education, Kaylin Reed. And Kaylin, thanks for coming in.
Hey Dennis, thanks for having me.
This is a big step that you have asked the board to consider this week. When you consider things that have happened in the past.
That's right, Dennis. You know, the last thing that I wanted to do as an elected official was come in the first year of my term propose that we raise taxes on
Which
everybody.
Some people would say political suicide.
Exactly. Okay. But, you know, when you look around at the surrounding districts, you look, they're building new schools over in Washington County, they're building schools in Taylor County, they're building schools in Nelson County. And when you actually walk through our schools, Dennis, and to be honest with you, before I got on the school board, I didn't spend a lot of time in the schools. But in this past year, I've had an opportunity to walk through the schools. And we've got some significant needs that need to be addressed. And they're needs that we don't have the means under the current finance system to do ourselves. So what we're going to ask the community to do is to do what they did in Boyle County recently and what they've done in Taylor County and Washington County in the past. You know, over the last 8 years ago when this was rejected, we've missed out on a little over $3 million in matching state funds over that time. Mm-hmm. That's $3 million that could have been used towards building Marion County schools. And it's time for us, our buildings are all getting old, and it's time for us to update and to meet the needs. You know,
we were at Hart County the other night. A local man was put into the 5th Region Athletic Director Hall of Fame, and the principal was fumbling for keys as we were going from one part of the school to the other. And he said, boy, I'll be glad to get a new high school down here where I can get the one key. And we said, how old's your high school? How old is this school? And he said, like 50 years. And of course, we looked at each other. Well, Marion County High School in a couple of years will be 50 years old. And I know the board has met in a couple of different schools. Talk about the overcrowding issues in some of the schools, if you would. I know Lebanon Elementary and Calvary come to mind very quickly.
Lebanon Elementary School and Calvary are probably in the worst shape with regards to overcrowding. Now, you know, Dennis, we've done an excellent job in this district of taking care of our facilities. So when you drive by the schools, you may not notice it. But when you walk into Calvary, for instance, you know, one of the things our teachers do is they like to differentiate their lessons, and they like to take one lesson and teach one group of kids maybe who are at a higher level and ones that are struggling. They like to pull them out for a little bit of extra help. Those pull-out sessions, Dennis, right now are taking place in the hallways and in the doorways and in every space they've got. There's not, to my knowledge, a stage in the county that could facilitate, you know, a play, because they're all being used as a multi-purpose stage is being used for a music room and the nurses station and a storage room for the physical education classes. You go into classrooms where our special ed students are receiving services, and rather than having a full classroom, you've got one room that's partitioned into 4 separate spaces. It's also where our speech and language teachers are. It's also where some of our floating teachers have their carts, and it's come to the point where we're bursting at the seams. There are children who live in the Calvary district who are not able to go to Calvary Elementary School because the school just can't facilitate having any more students, and it's the same issue down at Lebanon Elementary.
All right. Does that affect, because one question those who will oppose will say, does that affect the quality of the education?
In many instances, our teachers are able to overcome the obstacles. Calvary Elementary School is a perfect example. It's one of the top 10 elementary schools in the state. Mm-hmm. Lebanon Elementary School is a progressing proficient elementary school, so our teachers are trying to pick up the slack. But yes, at some point it can't help but affect the level of education.
All right, and then I guess as the way you teach changes with technology, are the schools adequately positioned to be able to do those types of things?
Well, think about what type of power needs you needed in a classroom that was built in 1968. Think about the outlets that you needed. Most of these schools, like Lebanon Elementary and Calvary and some of the older schools, the old parts of Glasscock and St. Charles, they have 2 outlets for a whole classroom. Now, we're going to put in a cart in this classroom that's going to have iPads, that's going to have Chromebooks, or something to further our one-to-one technology. That's just not enough power. None of these schools were equipped for the internet, so we've retrofitted a lot of them, but we're reaching the the extent of what we can do to retrofit. And then you start looking at, well, what would it cost to come back in? And we do a district facility plan every so often. The last district facilities plan we had, Dennis, showed that we had $40 million in capital infrastructure improvements that we need to do in this district.
All right, when you do your study, is this something that goes to the state and the state says, yes, you need, or is this just something done at the local level?
It's done at the local level with the input of architects that come in and advise us. But that is submitted to the state, and before we could embark on a major building project, we would have to submit that to the Kentucky Department of Education for approval, and they would look at our district facility plan to make sure that what we are planning to do meets within the larger goals of the district plan.
Okay, and they have to approve or disapprove whatever projects you want to do?
Yes.
Okay. When you spoke earlier that the community had lost out on the opportunity to receive state funding, it reminds me when someone goes to work and you're having an introduction and going over things with a new employee. And you say, okay, if you'll put up 2.5%, the company's going to match that for your 401. And the guy says, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And you're trying to say, wait a minute, if you'll put up 2.5%, you're getting 2.5% free money. Is that part of what you were coming from?
What they have done in the past, and of course, everything is subject to change, but here are the facts. The facts are that no recallable nickel has failed to have been equalized by the state. There's never been a district that's passed this nickel who has not had it equalized. It's not equalized 1-to-1, but whereas we can raise, with a nickel tax, it would raise about $600,000 in additional local revenue. The state would match that with a little over $400,000. So that $600,000 quickly becomes $1 million. And when you extrapolate that over the 20 years that you would issue a bond, it becomes a lot of money. Mm-hmm. You're talking about the state basically giving us $8 million to help us build facilities that we wouldn't otherwise get, which is why I said, 8 years ago when the nickel was recalled, we've missed out on that $400,000 a year. And Dennis, it's not only have we missed out on it, that money is still coming out of our paychecks and we're still paying into it, and we're watching it go to building projects in Taylor County. We're watching it go to building projects in Washington County. Some percentage of the money that's collected from Marion County is going to match these other nickels that are around in these districts.
Well, I know, spending a lot of time in Campbellsville, you've got a new high school and then a major renovation. I saw the superintendent at Bardstown the other day and told him what was going on. He said, tell him come over here, we have 3 nickels. I know Nelson County has done it, but there are going to be those, and obviously you know the numbers, 58% of the people 8 years ago voted against this. And I guess the typical argument is, A, we pay too much in taxes, B, they're wasting too much money. How do you answer those questions?
When you talk about how much we're paying in taxes, Dennis, no one wants to pay any more than their fair share. But when you look at our benchmark communities, we grade ourselves. There's about 20 school districts that we look at. All of the contiguous school districts and then school districts that are close that share our demographics. When you line those 20 up, Dennis, we pay 16th, 15th, or 16th most taxes of those groups. So we're in the lower half of those groups. And I'm not sure the public understands that the money that is generated from this nickel tax, should it pass, can only be used for capital improvement projects. It's segregated funds. We can't use it to add another assistant principal or a guidance counselor to an elementary school. We can't use it to hire a new football coach and get uniforms for the cheerleaders. This has to be money that's used specifically for building funds. And I would tell anyone who has a question about whether or not this is going to be money well spent, talk to your children, your grandchildren, the neighbor kids that are in schools. Go by one of our elementary schools. Make an appointment and walk through. Walk through Calvary Elementary. Walk through Lebanon Elementary School. We haven't talked at all about West Marion. West Marion is one of our newer buildings, and it was built in the mid-'80s. We're getting ready to replace a cooling tower out at Calvary. There's just some physical plant needs that have to be addressed.
Typically, when you've lived in a house 20, 25 years, you almost redo the entire interior. You update, you modernize. School buildings are no different.
They're not. One of the things that we have done a wonderful job with, as you mentioned, Marion County High School is 46 years old this year. You walk through Marion
I was in
County
the
High School.
second graduating class, so I remember.
You would not recognize that walking through and looking, because we've done a good job of keeping up. But it's the things that you can't see. It's the HVAC systems. It's the roof. If that roof at Marion County High School were to fail, that's probably a $2.5 or a $3 million roof. We just got done with a $3 million renovation out at Lebanon Middle School, which is our newest building, but it's now reached 20 years old, and every 20 years you have to do these things. We're running on borrowed time with some of our HVAC systems in our elementary schools. We do a great job of servicing them and keeping up with them, but you're right. After a period of time, you have to either do a significant renovation, overhaul, or it's been 20 years since we've built a new school here in Marion County.
All right. I know you guys have a rainy day fund. You try to salt away money. You've not taken the 4% tax that's allowed a time or two because you felt like the system was in pretty good financial shape. But if you need a new $2 or $3 million roof and you need some major renovations, HVACs, what does that do to the financial footing of the school system?
We're in solid financial footing now. We're not overly capitalized, but we're in good shape. But by saying we're in good shape, Dennis, we have a surplus of about $6 million. Now, I mentioned to you, if the roof goes out at Marion County High School, that's $3 million. That cuts our rainy day fund in half. That cuts our emergency contingency in half. We have a cooling system that's going out right now at Calvary. We're hoping we can fix it for $70,000 or $80,000. But if not, that's going to be a significant hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's not like the fixes that are on the horizon are going to be things that we can do cheaply. So when we say we have $6 million, we do. The state requires us to keep a significant portion of that in a rainy day fund. And the rest of that money, it cannot address the failures of the major projects that we have coming up.
Okay, but you're only bonded for a certain amount of money. Does the loss of rainy day funds affect your bonding capacity if you wanted to do a major project?
Well, what we would have to do is we would have to specifically allocate some of this rainy day money to a building fund, and it would have to be a fund that we could no longer access, which is why the Nickle is so important, because that is a segregated fund. It comes in and we don't have any control over it. We could move some money from our rainy day fund, as you called it, into a building fund and segregate it, but we would have to do that for the period of the next probably 10 years before we would have the potential to address one of the issues that we have, as opposed to all.
How much money could you bond for a project now? How much money could you get bonding for with the nickel tax?
Right now we have bonding potential of about $5 million, which is not enough to do even a major renovation of one of the schools. For instance, Lebanon Elementary School, the renovation, if we were to renovate Lebanon Elementary School, the projected cost is somewhere between $8 and $9 million. So we couldn't do that now. With the nickel, without state equalization, we would have $19 million in bonding potential. With the state equalization, we would be up to $26.5 million, which is enough to put a significant dent in the capital needs of the district. Now that doesn't meet all of our needs. There will still be needs, and we're going to have to use that money creatively should we get it. But it would quadruple it or quintuple our options.
And if you're not successful, costs will continue to go up, needs will continue to increase. Could it get to a point that the school system could never build a building if a move like this continues to fail?
It could, Dennis. What we would do is we would have to take the 4% every year, regardless. Right now, a 4% increase for the community is about 2.2 cents. So over the span of 3 years, we could raise 6 cents that we could, if we wanted to, set aside to use to build from. Now, the downside of that is you don't get the matching funds. You don't get that bump from the state. So we could continue to raise taxes, and the tax rate could actually be higher 3 years from now than it would be with the nickel, if that's the route we were forced to go.
All right. Obviously, there was a big move that was organized that, again, people think we waste too much, we waste too much, we waste too much, and other arguments against it. How do you go about convincing 19% of those people, would my math be right? No, 9% of those people to turn and say, yes, we do need to improve our school system, so that 58 against goes to 49 against, 51 in favor? What is your process to convince those people?
Well, number one, you have to educate people. But listening to me talk, listening to you talk, Dennis, is not going to be the key, because folks just have to see it with their own eyes. We want everybody to come in and walk through the schools. Dennis, if you could walk through one of our elementary schools, there's no way you can come out of that school saying, in 2016, this is what we owe our students.
Well, in 2015, I went to Calvary, where they invited people to come read to students. And you felt like you were in a library, and you were kind of like a snake walking through, and almost in a maze to get one from one room. And it did hit me somewhat, some overcrowding, that you couldn't just walk straight through, and you had stuff here and you had things here. But it's still going to be I guess you'd agree it's going to be a battle to get this thing done.
You know, it may, and we're certainly prepared to do that should we have to go that route, Dennis. But you know, one thing that we can do to help this, elections are about turnout. Who can turn out their constituents? Who can turn out the folks that support them? I firmly believe that more than half of the citizens of Marion County will support this if we can get those folks out to the polls. And Dennis, you know, Boyle County went through this about 6 months ago. Superintendent had some symposiums and had some forums in the schools, and their nickel was not recalled. The public looked at the situation and said, you know, we trust where you're going with this.
Right.
And they didn't face a recall election.
Why do you think Taylor, Washington, Nelson, Boyle, and maybe some others are able to get this done without going to the ballot box?
I think we had the misfortune of going first last time. I think we tried this back in 2008.
Which was a bad time in the economy as well.
The economy had just, we were right in the middle of the recession. We were talking about bailing out Wall Street and the auto industry, and interest rates were all over the place. I think now, with the benefit of a little bit of hindsight, in seeing what's going on in some of the surrounding counties, people who understand what it is we owe our kids, and that's what this is about. It's not about wanting a nicer school so the teachers will have a nicer place to teach, or so that the board members can host regional tournaments and pat each other on the back and say, look at this beautiful school we've built. This is about the kids. And our kids, I said this at the forum the other night, we have world-class students in this district. We have world-class teachers in this district. We don't have world-class facilities, and we owe them. Maybe this doesn't work. Maybe this doesn't pass. But if we don't try to provide them, then I'm doing a disservice, and the board is doing a disservice to the community.
Well, good luck to you Thursday night. I know that's only the first step, but obviously, you know, some people would say you put your head under the guillotine, but you know, good luck with what you're trying to get done.
Well, you know, if this is the issue, if we get this nickel passed and we can build some new schools and renovate some of our old schools, Dennis, what happens to my career aspirations as a board member are really secondary.
Well, I know it pays real well, so I mean, but, you know, be part of that. But we appreciate you taking your time to educate, you know, our viewing audience as well about some of the process.
And I would just encourage the audience out there, if you have a question, if you're still on the fence on this, call me, email me. I'm in the phone book. I practice law here in town. You can find my law firm, or make an appointment to go out to see one of the principals at one of the schools, because they'll walk you through and show you. No one here is trying to hide anything from anybody. We want you to come out and see the condition that your students are sitting in when they're trying to learn. And I really think, Dennis, if we can get people out to the schools to see the condition, they're going to see with their own eyes, they're going to understand this is something that needs to happen.
Okay. For Channel 6 TV Community Focus, I'm Dennis George.